What's up, Eagles Nation? What's going on, NFL World? How you doing, Division Rivals? This is Steven Hyder with Kansas City Sports Channel, the sports channel where the cerebral NFL fan comes for about 10 minutes of daily content. All right, guys, today's topic. Let's get a little weekend argument started. All right? I know normally views kind of go down a little bit on Friday, so, hey, if the views are going to be down, let's at least, for us that are actually watching it, let's have something to talk about over the weekend, guys. Here's the deal. I'm going to give you a little piece of information here. Okay? What you do with it, that's where we can argue and we can discuss and we can talk, guys. We have 3 decades of draft history that tells us the Eagles are not drafting a wide receiver, a tight end, or a cornerback in the top 10 picks. It doesn't mean our pick won't be that. It means that we haven't done this in a very, very long time. When I say 3 decades, guys, I want you to understand this. Not once in the 1990s did we even touch anything near that in the top 15 picks. Nothing inside of the 2000s did we touch any of those type of positions in the top 10 picks. Nothing in the 2010s did we touch those positions in the top 10 picks. As a matter of fact, underneath this ownership and the 2 general managers, never once have we drafted inside of the top 15 any position outside of defensive line, offensive line, and quarterback. That is the draft history of this organization. But this is what I'll say, guys. Don't lose hope. Just because we haven't done it doesn't mean we won't do it. I will say, traditions are meant to be broken at some times. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves going into this draft is this the year that the Eagles will actually break the trend? Hence lies the argument here, guys. Because let's be real. If we go back to selecting a position outside of offensive line, defensive line, or quarterback, the last time the Philadelphia Eagles made a selection that was not one of those 3 positions in the top 15 picks of the draft was in 1988. When they took my guy, Keith Jackson. Keith Jackson was a really good tight end, guys. He played for a few years in Philly. He was pretty good. I want to say, I can't remember if Jackson ended up going to Miami. It was either Jackson or Byers ended up going to Miami in the 90s, guys. Like, forgive me, I'm old. My memory goes on some of these older players sometimes. But, I mean, Keith Jackson was he was a dynamic football player. He was a good football player. Like, I'm not saying that the Eagles were mistaken in taking him there. They did a good job scouting that one. And as a matter of fact, guys, if we even go back into the top 10, so if you want to look at, like, when's the last time the Eagles took a skill position, right? A corner, a receiver, a tight end, a running back, any of those like kind of skill position players. When's the last time the Eagles did it? Speaking of Keith Byers, you got to go back to 1986, where the 10th pick in that 1986 draft, the Eagles took Keith Byers. Like, that's how long this history is. Guys, if you want to know when's the last time the Eagles took a wide receiver, I'll give you one, and not just the top 10, but in the top 5 picks. When's the last time the Eagles took a receiver in the top 5 picks? You got to go all the way back to 1984, guys. Just do the math, guys. I'm about to be 38. It's 37 years ago, okay? All the way back to 1984 with my guy Kenny Jackson when he was the 4th overall pick in the 1984 draft for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's the history that we're stacked against. And to be fair, that is the history you should be stacked against, because I do think that organizations that are not particularly good draft skill position players in the upper parts of the rounds. Because let's be honest, you take a receiver, that receiver better be Calvin Johnson if you take him in the top 10 picks. Like, I'm sorry, they have to be that level of greatness, or else you wasted everyone's time, you wasted your pick. That's the problem you're going to have here. And make no mistakes, guys. I'm not saying that Ja'Marr Chase won't be that level talent. I don't know, guys. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you on February 26th that I've done enough scouting yet to weigh in fully on what I believe people are where their value lies. What I will say is this. This is a tough year to say they won't do it. I just gave you the history. It's been since 1984 we took a receiver, somewhere around the top 5 picks. The struggle is, when you look at this draft, there's just not a lot, like, I'm going to give you the consensus. This doesn't mean that these are the 12 best players. This is where the consensus, if you look at like 4 or 5 databases, these are the names I see pop up the most often in terms of top 12 players in this draft class. All right, Trevor Lawrence, Penny Sewell, Jalen Waddle, Kyle Pitts, Caleb Farley, Justin Fields, Ja'Marr Chase, Zach Wilson, Christian Darrisaw, Rashawn Slater, Devontae Smith, and Patrick Surtain II. Those are the 12 players that are the most commonly top 12 players listed, okay? And then you got some guys on the outside that every now and then, depending on the draft, they might sneak in there. Guys like Mekhi Parsons is like kind of 50-50 with Is he a top player or not? Like, you do have guys like that. So the issue being is, guys, as you look at this draft, if you're picking at 6, you got 3 quarterbacks that universally most scouts put as top 10 players in this draft class, right? Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and what's his name? The kid from Zach Wilson from BYU. Those are the 3 quarterbacks people put in there. So if those guys are gone by the 5th pick of the 2020 and 2021 NFL draft, like, what do you do? What are you sitting here doing then? Because now you are looking at a situation to where, hey, hopefully Penei Sewell or someone like that slides down the board. That would be great because that's 3 picks. Well, if he's gone, that's 4. So you only got 2 other picks that are kind of remaining here, guys. So you almost get down to the aspects of you could trade back and try to acquire more picks. Or you can take your shot at 6. The problem is that if you trade back, the window to where you can trade back to is limited. Right? If you're only saying there's probably 10 to 15 players that are like tier 1 players in this draft class. It's not saying you can't find quality players throughout the draft, but they put these guys in tiers. And normally you could have, some really good drafts, you got 20 guys that are like tier 1. This draft, some people are saying it's more towards the line of 10 or 12 guys that are tier 1. And then it's a drop. You can't trade back that far then, or else you're falling out of a tier. But the question is if you're sitting there, remember I ripped them apart for, at number 6, they had the Eagles taking Christian Darrisaw, and I'm like, hey, look, I support trying to protect Jalen Hurts, trying to put offensive line talent around this guy, get the best offensive line you can possibly build out there, and keep this guy upright to be dynamic as a football player. I completely support that. But I also said, boy, I don't know if I'm taking Christian Darrisaw at 6. That seems like a reach to me. Especially when you can get a guy like Rashawn Slater that he can play tackle, he can play guard, he can play center. Like, if I'm going to reach for somebody, I'd rather reach for the versatility. You start looking at second receivers. At number 6, I think you could make legitimate arguments for Devontae Smith. Here's my thing, though, guys. You know my interpretation. As a guy who's coached wide receivers, a guy that really breaks down film and studies wide receivers, I don't touch any receiver that I cannot argue is a boundary side receiver in the top 20 picks. I just don't think the value's there, guys. Like, you don't touch a guy that's not a boundary side receiver in the top 20 picks. It's foolish value. I love Jalen Waddle. I think Jalen Waddle's going to be really good. I'm not touching that dude in the top 20 picks. That's a dude you're taking the back half of the first. You don't take that dude in the top 20 picks. And I'm not saying that Jalen Waddle can't be absolutely spectacular in the NFL. He can be. He can be dynamic. But you're talking about a specialty type player, man. Your ex-boundary side receiver is your workhorse receiver, man. Like, you just, to me, you don't mess around like that. You just don't do it. Some of you guys are going to point to the obvious, but what do we call Kyle Pitts? Is he a boundary side? Is he a tight end? He's a hybrid. He's a hybrid, guys. Is he worth the top 10 pick? That's the problem with this year's draft class, is that you have 12 players that are universally decided as being kind of like, these are the 12 players that most of these draft scouts are saying, like, hey, these are the tier 1, 12 best players in the 2021 NFL draft. But if you're sitting there at 6, you're sitting there in an awkward position, right? Because even in tier 1, you can say there's tier 1A and tier 1B. And I think we're falling just outside of tier 1A and into tier 1B. And that's the problem, is if you're in tier 1B, you want to move back to the backside of tier 1B, in my opinion, right? Because then it's better to acquire the picks if you don't have a Jamar Chase on the board, right? If you don't have one of the big 3 quarterbacks on the board, you don't have Jamar Chase on the board, right? And you don't have Penei Sewell on the board, you're in tier, in my opinion, you're in tier 1B. Like, at that point, I would probably move back a pick or 2 if somebody else wants to reach for a quarterback. Let them reach for a quarterback. Like, I would move back because you're still going to get a pretty good football player. And that's where I'm sitting here, guys. But I want to know your thoughts on this one because I know this one is going to cause controversy. I see things, like I said, guys, when I look through them, I see 13 to 14 guys that are often kind of intermixed between the top 12, okay? Mekhi Parsons being one of those guys, and then I've seen, like, Kwity Paye, the kid from Michigan, the defensive lineman. I've seen him mixed in there sometimes, too. Those are the other 2 guys I see kind of wavering their way in every now and then. And then there has been momentum here and there, depending on the corner position. You can see guys kind of rise or fall. J.C. Horn is all over the place, guys. Like, right now, they have J.C. Horn outside of the top 30 prospects, but I've seen J.C. Horn as high as number 10. Like, They're all over the place with some of these guys right now. But these are, like I said, 12 to 14 guys I always kind of see. What are you doing? Are you staying put and just going to take the best player available, even if it pushes you into Tier 1B? Even if you're in Tier 1B now and, like, the really, really super talented guys are gone, are you going to say, well, look, Gate, maybe you call Devontae Smith a Tier 1B. I still say that he's a difference maker in an offense. I would take him. So I would stay put, and I would take him. Or maybe you would say, you know, Gate, we're really depleted at the corner position. And listen, we know there's concerns about Patrick Surtain's like deep speed, but we're going to play a lot of too high safety looks. This guy is spectacular in the first 10 to 15 yards. He mirrors. He stays in hip pocket receivers. He could be a difference maker. You know, he's got the appropriate like reach for a corner to really get in there and break up passes. Like, you know, I think Patrick Surtain is worth the 6th pick. Take him. Or would you say, hey, you know what? I probably would let Carolina go chase a quarterback or let another team go chase a quarterback and then move back 2 picks or so to gain more picks and still get a Tier 1B player. Where are your opinions on this, guys? Like, where do you guys stand? And don't forget, guys, we are LB and I are formulating a draft pool. So I'm going to get the information out to you guys. I'll have LB release it out on his channel as well, guys. It's going to be a little buy-in. You're going to pick your player, and maybe I'll work with LB to come up with maybe some secondary prize stuff, maybe some merchandise, something like that, guys. We'll figure something out. All right, y'all. Peace. I'm out of here. See you on the next video.